Hey there, I'm Ben. Apple Vision Pro review. If you know me, you know that I've been waiting for this device, or something like it, since I was maybe 10. I always like to add this caveat to AR-related videos because my love for AR is something which I know must skew the way I perceive it. That said, I do my best to be objective. Also, for almost as long as I've been making videos, I've been anticipating and hearing rumors about Apple making something of this nature. My stance has been, I'll believe it when I see it, so imagine my excitement to have this enormous box on my desk. Is the VP worth it? At nearly $6,000, you would almost expect miracles. That said, even if it could only replace my monitors, it would probably be worth it because, as you know, monitors are expensive. So let's get into the video that I've been waiting my entire life to make. Starting, as always, with fit, finish, and physicality. Yeah, this product is bad. It is so bad. I'll just edit out the crying in post. And I know a lot of people have shit on it, but I actually do have some unique insights, so we'll get to that in a minute. But let's start with huge mistake number 1. It is very uncomfortable to wear for extended periods. Yes, I know Apple acknowledges this, but it's worse than any other headset that I have tried. Maybe that's just because I'm using the head strap they only use in commercials. So I switched to the one that has more support, and I can honestly say, holy shit, what the how in God's balls did they manage to make this thing so uncomfortable for people standing up? Something that I'm noticing is if you're laying down and your head is at about a 45-degree angle, you can wear the headset for a lot longer. Apple recommends a break every 20 to 30 minutes, and honestly, as shitty as it is, it makes sense. And to be clear, the goofy head strap did help a little, but only by about 10 minutes or so, which again, is crazy for something that costs this much. Also, because it's Apple, I was really shocked by this, but the magnets that hold the canvas faceplate on are really weak, and I found myself multiple times casually knocking it off while I'm handling the headset. Huge mistake number 2. Why isn't the power cable MagSafe? Of all the devices Apple has ever created, this device is the one for which MagSafe makes the most sense. It's literally attached to your head. I've got to think that Apple did this just so they could hit people with Gen 2, but there's no way they just forgot. Genuinely, and from the bottom of my heart, Apple for this insanity. At the very least, they could have had a MagSafe adapter running from the battery pack to the charger, especially given that people will be using this while charging it. Lastly, let's talk about the light seal. I would say that the light seal isn't great on this. Granted, it's due largely in part to the fact that I have a beaky nose, but here's the really crazy thing. It actually doesn't matter most of the time. They kind of got away with this because the pass-through is so good that it doesn't really matter to me most of the time that there's some light leaking in. Honestly, a lot of people have said this, so I won't dwell on it, but goddamn, this is probably the best pass-through I've ever seen, although I do have some caveats that I will get to in a minute. I still need to test it against the MetaQuest Pro, but ultimately it's the closest thing I've ever seen to full functional augmented reality in a consumer device. And that's why, for most usage, except for immersive video and the actual VR content, that the light seal doesn't really matter, because the light leaking in matches the light that you're seeing, which is filtered through the cameras. Something, however, which I absolutely fucking hate is the way in which everything is slightly blurry. You might not notice at first, but as you begin to use this device more and more, it just feels like you're not wearing your glasses. Like, you need a prescription, but there is literally no prescription for you to have. This is, of course, partly due to the foveated rendering, and I'm sure in a few years, our children will look back on our GPUs and laugh. But for now, this is probably the best in the industry. Okay, software and interface. I'm going to start out here by saying that this interface is to VR and AR what the touchscreen was to smartphones. A lot of people have gushed about it, so I won't say much more, but rest assured, this is the future. Eye tracking and retinal ID are quite awesome. That said, there's at least one massive bug which Apple has to contend with, which we will get into. Before that, though, one notable error is the way the keyboard spawns on top of the content that I'm supposed to be typing. Annoying. Although, not as annoying as a $6,000 headset that you can only wear for about 20 to 30 minutes. Oops, got sidetracked there. I am impressed at how wide the sensor range is. It's wide enough that there were times when I would have my hands above or behind my head and tap my fingers thinking that it would work, even though that's obviously not really possible. Going back to the software though, the latest OS makes the interface significantly better. Instead of having to look up to summon the command center, you can do that using your left hand, which is great mostly because sometimes command center wouldn't pop up no matter how hard I looked up. Next, let's talk about Eyesight. As I mentioned, this arguably is the future. As I also may have mentioned, this device makes you realize how much we aren't looking at the stuff we interact with. Intuitively, we glance at the button and then we select it. But this workflow requires us to look at the button and click and not look away while we're doing so, which is arguably not as intuitive. Also, I'm noticing some accidental touches. Glances? Touches? I don't really know. The point is that the accidental touches are not really enough to be a deal breaker. It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. Which brings me to my most hated feature, aka huge mistake number 3, which I am very originally going to entitle the when the buttons are really close together problem. Or even somewhat close together, or the app just wasn't specifically designed for Vision Pro problem. So in software that's been specifically developed for Vision Pro, it doesn't really crop up, but if you're using the internet, i.e. a browser, Vision Pro has a very serious issue. In order to click on one of two buttons that are close together, you need to look above the button that you want to look at. I don't know what to compare this to. It feels so goofy. And yes, I did adjust my settings. I tuned this thing as best as I possibly could, and I still had this issue. For example, the VP does not have a YouTube app, which means I need to use a browser. Something I've noticed is that when using full screen video on YouTube, that full screen button is dangerously close to the corner toggle, which we commonly use to resize windows, or whatever the fuck Apple's calling them. That means that it's very difficult to get a video to play in full screen. The same issue persists when editing text, and this is a big deal because it happens even in apps that have been optimized for Vision OS. As I write this, I try to edit the heading of one of these paragraphs. It's very difficult to move the cursor to the right place and then select the text that I want. More often than not, I find that the cursor goes somewhere below where I'm trying to, even though I'm very deliberately looking exactly where I want the cursor to be, which is frustrating. Although not as frustrating as having a device that costs nearly $6,000, which you cannot wear for more than 20 minutes. Oh, there I go again. Next, let's talk about hand tracking. I noticed that when I'm looking at photos or videos, there's some ghosting / funny business with my hands if they need to be in front of the image that's being displayed. Obviously, this masking tech will improve, but at the moment it looks kind of janky. Okay, I think we've done enough mandatory complaining. Let's talk about ecosystem integration. This is actually a place where the VP really shines. However, for some reason, none of my contacts are synced when I look at my messages. All I see are phone numbers and occasionally an email address that I recognize. On the other hand, I do have to say that I am so impressed and delighted with how well iPad apps run on this device. I know I did just spend like 5 minutes complaining about the whole buttons problem, but honestly, having only developed a smidgen of software, I can only imagine the logistical nightmare that was getting everything to work the way it should on this device. Further, I love how easy it is to use my Mac's keyboard and trackpad with the VP. I've never found a keyboard integration that was as flawless. Further, the full color foveated pass-through makes real-time keyboard tracking pretty much unnecessary, which again is a really huge bonus. But let's really dig into interfacing with a Mac. To start with, I was a little bit worried about doing this review because generally when I have a device which is capable of writing a review, I write the whole review on that device. Now, as mentioned, editing text with dictation and Eyesight would have been horrendous, but given the quality integration with MacBooks, it's very easy, even when using the Mac keyboard for input on apps running natively in the Vision Pro. Part of me feels like this is kind of cheating, but at the same time, as much as Apple's walled garden feels like North Korea sometimes, this is one of the benefits, so shrug, I guess. Also, I really like that they didn't try to use Eyesight when using the Mac. That would have been a massive oversight. Do you get it? Do you get the joke? Oversight? Because Vision Pro, it uses Eyesight. It uses your, so it's never mind. One downside, however, is that I can't have more than one screen for my Mac. To be honest, I'm finding that the screen is generally large enough for my purposes, but it's a little surprising to me that I can have 2 or 3 windows stacked side by side, but the GPU can't handle just running those individually or letting me have 2 monitors, which I'm accustomed to and enjoy. That said, enough Mac apps run simultaneously on Vision Pro that I don't really feel the lack of it all that much. I also love that I can so easily switch between controlling the headset and using my hands while also controlling the Mac. That said, if I glance away from my Mac screen and even accidentally look at one of my Apple Vision screens, my cursor is diverted away from my Mac. And it doesn't happen every time, but if you're typing, you do notice. It happens enough to be annoying because if I look away, I have to replace my cursor back to where it was, even though that's not what I intended to do. Also, it would be nice if I could pass audio from my Mac through my headset speakers. It's weird that this is not already an option, especially given how closely and well integrated these devices are. Another weird glitch is that the connect button, which hovers above my MacBooks, only works intermittently. It just seems very buggy even though my MacBooks are on and active. Worth noting that my experience was very different on my Macbook Air. In this case, I have to say that I'm pretty disappointed. In addition to the buggy connection button, it just feels like this device, despite its alleged compatibility, just doesn't have the graphics processing to interface well with the Vision Pro. Sometimes it's better when the Air is plugged in, but to borrow a phrase from a viewer, it feels kind of kludgy. I tried using the VP and my MacBook Air in a cafe and I just couldn't. It was so laggy. Oh yeah, and for further testing, I just want to talk about Apple Arcade on the Vision Pro. So They give you a free trial, and normally when you subscribe to a free trial, you can then go and cancel that free trial immediately if you know you're not going to want to continue it, and you'll still get the benefit of the 2 weeks or whatever it is that is free. When I signed up for Apple Arcade, they had axed this option. It sounds like they're willing to give you an easy out when it comes to everyone else's subscriptions, but not theirs. I would just like to say, again, a very heartfelt fuck Apple for this. While we're talking about it, I would like to be able to schedule cancellations. This is not rocket surgery. The reason we don't have it is because Apple would make less money if we did. But Apple has to realize that happy customers are ones who stay and keep spending. Customer loyalty is the holy grail, and this would add to it. Hey there, thanks for watching this far. Seriously, it means a lot. As you may have noticed, normally I do a summary and say, hey, is this product worth buying? Spoiler alert, it's not. But in this case, I had to split the video into 2 parts, so subscribe for part 2. You know I normally don't do this, but this product is massive. I will be talking about immersive video, which was, frankly, kind of mind-blowing. There are lots of interesting things to talk about yet, so stay tuned for more garbage. And as always, I'm Benjamin Butcher. This is BRBTG, and as ever, I'll be right back.